Bananas are technically berries, but strawberries aren't. It might sound completely backwards at first, but according to botanical definitions, a banana is considered a berry while a strawberry is not. That's because in botany, a berry isn't defined by how sweet it is or how small it is. It's defined by how it forms and what parts of the flower contribute to the fruit. A berry is a fleshy fruit that develops from a single ovary and contains seeds inside its soft middle. Bananas fit this definition perfectly. They develop from a flower with a single ovary, they have a soft edible interior, and their tiny seeds are embedded inside. Strawberries, however, are a completely different story. They actually form from a flower that has multiple ovaries. Each of those tiny seeds you see on the outside of a strawberry is technically its own separate fruit called an achene, each containing a single seed. The red fleshy part we think of as the fruit is actually derived from the base of the flower, not the ovary itself. This botanical reclassification isn't just a quirky technicality, it shows how the everyday way we group fruits can differ wildly from how nature organizes them. Other surprising true berries include kiwis, tomatoes, and even eggplants. A day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus. Venus is often called Earth's sister planet because it's similar in size and composition, but when it comes to how time works there, it's an entirely different world. A day on Venus, meaning the time it takes for Venus to complete one full rotation on its axis, is about 243 Earth days long. Meanwhile, a year on Venus, the time it takes for Venus to orbit the Sun once, is only about 225 Earth days. That means Venus spins so slowly that by the time it rotates once, it's already completed an entire trip around the Sun. And there's something even stranger. Venus rotates backwards compared to most of the other planets, a motion called retrograde rotation. On Earth, the Sun rises in the east and sets in the west. On Venus, because of its slow, backward spin, the Sun would rise in the west and set in the east, if you could somehow survive the scorching temperatures and crushing atmospheric pressure to see it. Scientists believe Venus's bizarre rotation could be the result of a massive collision early in its history, or perhaps gravitational interactions with the Sun and other planets over billions of years. However it happened, it makes Venus one of the most unusual planets in our solar system. Time passes faster at your face than at your feet. According to Einstein's general theory of relativity, gravity doesn't just pull objects towards each other, it actually warps the fabric of space-time itself. The stronger the gravitational field, the more time slows down relative to areas with weaker gravity. Since your feet are closer to Earth's center of mass than your head, they experience slightly stronger gravitational forces. This means time actually flows more slowly at your feet than at your head. This difference is extremely small, about 90 billionths of a second over a 79-year lifespan, but it's very real and has been proven experimentally. This effect becomes much more pronounced in environments with extreme gravity differences. For instance, time passes measurably more slowly for GPS satellites orbiting Earth compared to time on Earth's surface. The satellites experience weaker gravity in orbit, so time moves faster for them, by about 38 microseconds per day. GPS systems have to continuously correct for this time difference. Without these relativistic corrections, GPS positioning would accumulate errors of about 10 kilometers each day, rendering the system useless. The most dramatic examples of gravitational time dilation occur near black holes, where gravity is so intense that time can slow drastically compared to distant observers. If you could somehow hover near a black hole's event horizon, the point of no return, you might experience just 1 hour, while observers far away from the black hole would see years or even centuries pass. The time difference due to gravity isn't just theoretical, it's been measured precisely using atomic clocks. In 2010, researchers at the National Institute of Standards and Technology placed one atomic clock on an elevation just 33 centimeters higher than another identical clock. The higher clock, experiencing slightly weaker gravity, measurably ticked faster than the lower one, exactly as Einstein's theories predicted. What makes this particularly fascinating is realizing that time itself is not the rigid, universal constant we intuitively think it is. Time is flexible, relative, and dependent on gravity and motion. Every object in the universe effectively experiences its own unique time flow, depending on the gravitational fields it experiences and how it moves through space. So, in a very real sense, your head is actually aging slightly faster than your feet, though the difference is far too small to notice in everyday life. This reality, though imperceptible in our daily experience, fundamentally shapes how we navigate and understand our universe. There are more trees on Earth than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. At first, it might seem impossible. Stars are countless twinkling points stretching across the sky. How could Earth, one tiny planet, possibly have more trees than the Milky Way has stars? But when researchers did the math, the results were astonishing. Scientists estimate there are about 100 to 400 billion stars in the Milky Way. Meanwhile, a 2015 study published in Nature revealed that there are roughly 3 trillion trees on Earth. That's over 7 times more trees than stars in our galaxy, even if you use the highest estimate for stars. This incredible number was calculated using satellite imagery, forest inventories, and sophisticated computer modeling. It turns out that Earth's forests, especially in remote places like the Amazon rainforest, the boreal forests of Canada and Russia, and the jungles of Central Africa, are teeming with trees on a mind-blowing scale. And it's not just forests. Trees sprout up in cities, along rivers, on mountain slopes, and even in deserts where water occasionally flows. Each tree quietly doing its own work, absorbing carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen, providing homes for countless animals. Sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins. Dolphins are famous for their ability to stay underwater for long periods, holding their breath while they swim gracefully below the surface. A bottlenose dolphin, for example, can hold its breath for about 10 minutes. But sloths, surprisingly, they can hold their breath for up to 40 minutes, 4 times longer than a dolphin. The reason is hidden in their biology. Sloths have an incredibly slow metabolism, which means their bodies use oxygen at a much lower rate than faster moving animals. To conserve even more energy, they can slow their heart rates dramatically, sometimes to 1/3 of their normal pace, when they need to dive underwater or simply remain motionless. Sloths are surprisingly good swimmers. In their native rainforests, especially during floods or when crossing rivers, they can paddle through water easily, often holding their breath for astonishing amounts of time while gliding just beneath the surface. It's another example of how sloths, often underestimated because of their slow movements, are actually highly specialized, uniquely adapted creatures, perfectly attuned to the pace of life in the rainforests of Central and South America. A cloud can weigh over 1,000,000 pounds. Those fluffy, seemingly weightless formations floating effortlessly above us are actually incredibly heavy. An average cumulus cloud, the puffy, cotton-like clouds we often see on partly cloudy days, weighs approximately 1.1 million pounds, or about 500 metric tons. That's roughly equivalent to the weight of 100 elephants or 250 cars suspended in the sky. This seeming paradox becomes clearer when we understand what clouds actually are. Clouds are composed of countless tiny water droplets or ice crystals suspended in the atmosphere. Each individual droplet is extremely small, typically about 0.01 millimeters in diameter, but a single cloud contains billions upon billions of these droplets. To calculate a cloud's weight, scientists consider its volume and water density. A modest cumulus cloud might measure 1 kilometer across and contain about half a gram of water per cubic meter. When you multiply this water density across the cloud's entire volume, you arrive at this surprisingly massive figure. So why don't these million-pound masses come crashing down to Earth? The answer lies in how these water droplets are distributed. The water in clouds isn't concentrated in one place, but spread out over an enormous volume of air. Each tiny droplet is so small that the normal air currents and updrafts easily keep them aloft. The droplets fall so slowly through the air, at about 1 centimeter per second, that even slight upward air movements are sufficient to keep them suspended. It's similar to how dust particles can float in air despite having weight. Their small size creates enough air resistance relative to their mass that they can remain suspended with just minimal air movement. Clouds just operate on a much larger collective scale. What's even more fascinating is that the air supporting these massive clouds is even heavier. The air beneath an average cumulus cloud weighs significantly more than the cloud itself, which helps explain how the atmosphere can support such weighty formations. When conditions change and water droplets combine to form larger, heavier droplets that air currents can no longer support, precipitation occurs. Rain, snow, or hail falls from the cloud. This process doesn't empty the cloud immediately because new water vapor can continuously condense into droplets, maintaining the cloud's structure even as some water falls away. Understanding a cloud's true weight gives us a deeper appreciation for the incredible physics at work in our atmosphere every day. These massive, floating reservoirs of water, seemingly defying gravity, demonstrate the delicate balance of forces that shape our weather and climate systems. Sharks existed before trees. Sharks have been swimming the oceans for over 400 million years. Trees, by contrast, only evolved about 350 million years ago. This means that sharks were already old, millions of years old, before the very first tree ever sprouted on land. At the time sharks first appeared, Earth's landscapes would have been mostly barren, rocky terrain, with small plants like mosses and liverworts. Forests didn't exist yet. Dinosaurs hadn't appeared. Even insects were relatively new. Sharks survived massive extinction events that wiped out countless other species, including the Permian-Triassic extinction, sometimes called the Great Dying, which eliminated about 90% of Earth's species. Yet sharks persisted, evolving, adapting, and continuing their reign in the oceans. Honey never spoils. Honey is a natural marvel when it comes to food preservation. Thanks to its unique chemical makeup, it doesn't spoil over time, even over millennia. Honey is naturally low in moisture and extremely high in sugar, creating an environment that's hostile to bacteria and microorganisms. But that's not the only reason. Honey is also acidic, with a typical pH between 3.2 and 4.5. This acidity helps prevent the growth of most pathogens. Plus, bees add an enzyme called glucose oxidase to the nectar as they transform it into honey. This enzyme breaks down into tiny amounts of hydrogen peroxide, further protecting the honey from spoiling. In ancient Egypt, honey was used not just as a food, but also as a medicine and even as an offering in tombs. Archaeologists have uncovered sealed pots of honey in pharaohs' tombs, and remarkably, the honey was still safe to eat, smooth, fragrant, and intact after more than 3,000 years. There are more possible chess games than atoms in the observable universe. Chess, with its simple 8x8 board and 32 pieces, might seem like a relatively straightforward game. However, the number of possible unique chess games that could theoretically be played exceeds the number of atoms in the entire observable universe by a staggering margin. The number of atoms in the observable universe is estimated to be around 10 to the 80th power. That's a 1 followed by 80 zeros. In comparison, the number of possible chess games, known as the Shannon number, named after mathematician Claude Shannon who first calculated it, is approximately 10 to the 120th power, a 1 followed by 120 zeros. This means there are roughly 10 to the 40th power times more possible chess games than atoms in the observable universe. To consider how this astronomical number arises from such a simple game, consider the structure of chess. In the opening move, white has 20 possible moves, 16 pawn moves, and 4 knight moves. Black then has the same 20 options for responding. This means there are 400 possible positions after just one move by each player. The number of possibilities expands dramatically with each subsequent move. After the second move by each player, there are over 197,000 possible positions. After 3 moves each, this grows to over 121 million possibilities. This exponential growth continues throughout the game, though not all theoretical games would be played in practice, because many would lead to quick checkmates or be strategically unsound. Shannon's calculation of 10 to the 120th power is actually a conservative estimate, as it assumes an average of about 30 possible moves per position and an average game length of 40 moves per player. Some games could be longer, potentially leading to even more possibilities. This incomprehensibly large number illustrates why chess has remained intellectually challenging for centuries and why even modern supercomputers cannot solve chess by calculating all possible outcomes. Even if a computer could analyze a trillion positions per second, it would take longer than the current age of the universe to calculate all possible chess games. The vast possibility space of chess explains why the game continues to yield new strategies and why chess masters can still discover novel approaches after centuries of study. Despite being played for over 1500 years in its current form, chess remains fresh because humans have explored only a tiny fraction of its total possibility space. This mathematical reality about chess also demonstrates how complexity can emerge from relatively simple rules. Chess has just 6 types of pieces moving on a modest board according to well-defined rules, yet it generates more possibilities than there are atoms in our vast universe, a humbling reminder of how complexity can arise from simplicity. Butterflies can taste with their feet. When a butterfly lands on a flower, it isn't just admiring the colors, it's tasting it. That's because butterflies have taste sensors called chemoreceptors located on their feet. When a butterfly lands on a surface, these sensors instantly detect chemical signals, helping the butterfly decide if the plant is good for laying eggs or if it offers tasty nectar to sip. This ability is crucial, especially for species where the caterpillars need very specific plants to survive. By tasting leaves with their feet, butterflies can ensure their future offspring will have the right food after hatching. Next time you see a butterfly lightly tapping its feet on a leaf or flower, you can imagine it thoughtfully sampling the world, one delicate step at a time. Some metals can be liquid near room temperature. Gallium is a soft, silvery metal that's unlike almost anything else you'll encounter. At room temperature, it's solid, but just barely. Its melting point is only about 85 degrees Fahrenheit, which means the warmth of your hand can turn it into a shimmering liquid puddle. Despite this, gallium isn't toxic like mercury, making it relatively safe to handle. It also doesn't evaporate easily, so it won't release harmful fumes at room temperatures. Gallium's unusual properties make it useful in electronics, LEDs, and even in experimental solar panels. Beyond its industrial applications, there's something almost magical about holding a solid piece of metal that melts into a mirror-like liquid simply from your body heat. It's a real-world example of the boundary between solid and liquid being much more delicate than we usually realize. The smell of rain has a name. That earthy, fresh smell that fills the air when rain first falls after a dry spell is known as petrichor. The word was coined in 1964 by 2 Australian scientists, combining petra, meaning stone, and ichor, the fluid that flows in the veins of the gods in Greek mythology. Petrichor is created by oils secreted from plants during dry periods, which are absorbed into soil and rocks. When rain finally comes, the moisture releases these oils into the air. Additionally, a compound called geosmin, produced by soil-dwelling bacteria, becomes aerosolized and adds to the scent. Humans seem to be particularly sensitive to geosmin. Even tiny amounts can be detected by our noses. Some researchers think this sensitivity is evolutionary, helping early humans find water sources. So, the next time you step outside and breathe in that fresh rain smell, remember you're experiencing a scent billions of years in the making. Octopuses have been observed using tools. Tool use was once thought to be a uniquely human trait, then later extended to certain birds and primates. But octopuses too have demonstrated this sophisticated behavior. In particular, the veined octopus has been seen collecting coconut shells on the ocean floor, carrying them across great distances, and assembling them into makeshift shelters when needed. They even carefully stack and transport the shells for future use, a clear sign of planning ahead. This kind of behavior shows remarkable intelligence. It requires foresight, dexterity, and an understanding of how objects can be manipulated to solve problems. It's one of many reasons octopuses are considered among the most intelligent invertebrates on Earth. There's a species of jellyfish that can technically live forever. The tiny jellyfish species Turritopsis dohrnii, often called the immortal jellyfish, has an extraordinary ability. When faced with injury, sickness, or old age, it can revert its cells to an earlier stage of life, essentially starting its life cycle over again. It does this through a process called transdifferentiation, where one type of cell transforms into another type, something almost no other animal can do naturally. In theory, this could allow the jellyfish to avoid death indefinitely, although in practice, they usually end up being eaten by predators or succumb to disease. Still, the fact that nature has crafted a creature with such a loophole around aging is truly mind-blowing. Cows have best friends and get stressed when separated. Cows are often seen as simple farm animals, but studies have shown they have complex emotional lives. Researchers have found that cows form close bonds with certain other cows, their best friends, and when they're separated from them, their stress levels rise. This was demonstrated in an experiment where cows' heart rates and cortisol levels were measured. When cows were with their preferred companions, they were calm and relaxed. When separated, their stress indicators increased significantly. It's a touching reminder that friendship is a powerful force across the animal kingdom, not just among humans or pets. In a cow's world, companionship brings comfort, safety, and joy. Bananas share 60% of their DNA with humans. It might sound absurd at first, but humans and bananas share approximately 60% of the same DNA. This surprising genetic similarity highlights the fundamental unity of life on Earth and the deep evolutionary connections between all living organisms. This shared genetic heritage exists because all living things, from bananas to bacteria to human beings, descended from the same common ancestor that lived roughly 1.5 billion years ago. Over time, different branches of the evolutionary tree developed in different directions, but they all carried forward many of the basic genetic instructions inherited from that ancient common ancestor. The genes we share with bananas are primarily those involved in basic cellular functions, processes so fundamental to life that they've remained relatively unchanged over billions of years of evolution. These include genes that control how cells divide, how energy is converted from one form to another, how proteins are built from genetic instructions, and how cells transport molecules. For example, both humans and bananas have genes for certain housekeeping enzymes that break down sugars to produce energy, repair damaged DNA, and synthesize proteins. We also share genes involved in cellular structure, like those that code for actin and tubulin, proteins that form part of the cellular skeleton. What makes humans different from bananas and other organisms is not just the 40% of unique genes, but also how genes are regulated and expressed. Humans have approximately 20,000 to 25,000 genes, not dramatically more than many simpler organisms. The complexity of humans comes largely from sophisticated gene regulation, when, where, and how much each gene is activated, and from alternative splicing, where genes can be read in different ways to produce different proteins. This genetic relationship extends across the tree of life. Humans share about 85% of our DNA with mice, 60% with fruit flies, and even 15% with baker's yeast. As we compare organisms that diverge from our evolutionary lineage earlier and earlier, the percentage of shared DNA generally decreases, but an impressive amount of genetic similarity persists across even distantly related species. Understanding these genetic relationships has practical applications in medical research. Scientists often study genes in simpler organisms like fruit flies or zebrafish because many of these genes have counterparts in humans that function similarly. This comparative genomics approach has led to important discoveries about human diseases and potential treatments. The significant genetic similarity between humans and bananas serves as a humbling reminder that despite our cognitive abilities and complex societies, we remain part of the great continuum of life on Earth, sharing fundamental biological processes with every living thing around us, even the fruit in our kitchen bowls. Sea otters hold hands while sleeping so they don't drift apart. Sea otters are incredibly social animals, and one of the most adorable behaviors they exhibit is holding hands, or paws, while they sleep on the water's surface. By linking together in what's sometimes called a raft, groups of otters ensure they stay together and don't drift away from each other while they rest. Sometimes they even wrap themselves in floating kelp to anchor themselves to a spot. This behavior is also very practical. Floating on open water can be risky for a small animal, and sticking together reduces the danger of drifting into predators' territory or getting lost from the group. Hummingbirds are the only birds that can fly backwards. Hummingbirds are marvels of the natural world, with wings that beat up to 80 times per second. Thanks to their incredible wing structure and rapid muscle control, they are the only birds capable of flying not just forward and hovering in place, but also backwards. Their wings rotate in a full circle, allowing them to generate lift on both the upstroke and downstroke. This gives them unmatched control in the air, allowing them to dart backward from a flower after feeding, hover midair with perfect stillness, or move side to side like tiny helicopters. Their agility is not just beautiful, it's crucial for survival, helping them feed on nectar while evading predators and navigating dense vegetation. The loudest sound in recorded history circled the Earth 4 times. On August 27, 1883, the volcanic island of Krakatoa in Indonesia experienced an eruption so powerful that it produced what is considered the loudest sound in recorded history. The explosion was heard up to 3,000 miles away, and the sound wave generated by the blast circled the Earth at least 4 times. The Krakatoa eruption released energy estimated to be equivalent to 200 megatons of TNT, about 13,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The explosion was so violent that it ruptured the eardrums of sailors on ships 40 miles away. People nearly 3,000 miles away in Perth, Australia, reported hearing what sounded like distant cannon fire, though they were completely unaware of its source. On the island of Rodriguez in the Indian Ocean, nearly 3,000 miles away from Krakatoa, people reported hearing the distant roar of heavy guns. What makes this particularly remarkable is that the sound typically doesn't travel such vast distances. Under normal circumstances, sound waves disperse and weaken relatively quickly. However, the Krakatoa explosion was so powerful that it generated sound waves that traveled through the atmosphere in a way that allowed them to be heard at these extraordinary distances. Even more impressive is that the pressure wave from the explosion was strong enough to register on barographs around the world. These instruments recorded the pressure wave circling the Earth at least 7 times over the following 5 days. The first 4 circuits were audible to human ears as distant sounds, while the remaining circuits were still detectable by instruments but no longer audible. The eruption had other global effects as well. It ejected enormous amounts of ash and aerosols into the atmosphere, causing spectacular red sunsets worldwide for months afterward. Global temperatures dropped by an average of 1.2 degrees Celsius in the year following the eruption, and weather patterns were disrupted for several years. The tsunami generated by the Krakatoa eruption reached heights of up to 120 feet and killed approximately 36,000 people on nearby islands. The eruption itself completely destroyed the island of Krakatoa, though subsequent volcanic activity has since created a new island, Anak Krakatau, in the same location. The Krakatoa eruption provides a sobering reminder of the immense power of geological forces and their potential global impacts. It also demonstrates how sound, something we typically think of as a local phenomenon, can, under extraordinary circumstances, become a global event that literally circles our planet multiple times. The Eiffel Tower can be 15 centimeters taller in the summer. The Eiffel Tower is made of wrought iron, and like all metals, iron expands when it gets hot. This phenomenon is known as thermal expansion. When the temperature rises in summer, the metal's molecules move more energetically, causing the structure to expand outward and upward. Engineers who maintain the tower regularly account for this seasonal growth, which can add up to about 15 centimeters in height. Conversely, in colder weather, the tower contracts again. Sometimes it even tilts slightly away from the sun as different sides of the metal expand at different rates based on sunlight exposure. Octopuses have 9 brains. We already know octopuses are brilliant, but part of that genius comes from their unusual nervous system. An octopus has not 1, but 9 brains. Here's how it works. The central brain, located between their eyes, handles the big picture decisions and problem solving. But each of the 8 arms has its own mini brain, technically a large cluster of neurons that can independently control movement and respond to stimuli. In fact, about 2/3 of an octopus's neurons are located in its arms, not its main brain. This allows each arm to explore, touch, and manipulate objects on its own, almost as if the arms have minds of their own. It's why octopuses are so incredibly agile and clever when interacting with their environments, solving puzzles, escaping enclosures, and even playing with toys. Each limb is both an individual explorer and part of the greater creature. Flamingos can only eat with their heads upside down. Flamingos possess one of the most unusual feeding mechanisms in the animal kingdom. They can only eat effectively with their heads turned upside down. This seemingly backward approach is actually an ingenious adaptation that has evolved over millions of years. A flamingo's distinctive bill is specially designed to work upside down. When feeding, a flamingo will place its head upside down in the water with its upper bill, which would typically be the bottom bill in other birds, facing downward and resting on the ground. What looks like the upper jaw of a flamingo is actually its lower jaw when the head is positioned normally. The bird then uses its muscular tongue to pump water in and out of its bill at a rate of about 4 times per second. Their bills contain rows of tiny, hair-like structures called lamellae that act as sophisticated filters. As water passes through these lamellae, small food particles like algae, tiny crustaceans, mollusks, and insect larvae are trapped inside while excess water flows back out. This unique feeding method allows flamingos to feed in muddy, brackish waters where few other large birds can efficiently harvest food. Their specialized bills have evolved to occupy a specific ecological niche that has relatively little competition from other species. What makes this even more fascinating is the connection between this feeding behavior and the flamingo's iconic pink coloration. Their diet of algae, shrimp, and other aquatic invertebrates contains carotenoid pigments, the same type of compounds that give carrots their orange color. When flamingos digest these foods, the carotenoids break down and are absorbed into their fat. These pigments are then deposited in their growing feathers, giving flamingos their distinctive pink hue. Young flamingos actually have gray or white feathers when they hatch. They develop their pink coloration only after consuming a carotenoid-rich diet. Flamingos in captivity will gradually fade to a paler shade unless their diet is supplemented with carotenoids, often in the form of foods like beet juice or special flamingo feed containing pigments. This remarkable feeding adaptation illustrates evolution's endless creativity. By developing a completely inverted feeding mechanism, flamingos have thrived for millions of years, turning what might seem like an awkward posture into one of nature's most successful specialized feeding strategies. The longest living animal was a clam named Ming. In 2006, scientists dredging the waters near Iceland discovered a quahog clam that turned out to be astonishingly old. When they analyzed its growth rings, similar to how trees show age, they realized this clam was born in 1499. That's the same year as the death of explorer Christopher Columbus, and just a few years after Leonardo da Vinci painted The Last Supper. This ancient clam was nicknamed Ming, after the Chinese Ming dynasty that ruled at the time of its birth. Ming lived to be about 507 years old, the oldest individual non-colonial animal ever recorded. Ming's incredible lifespan isn't just a curiosity, it's helped scientists study how cells age and what mechanisms protect living tissues over centuries. Understanding creatures like Ming could one day help us better understand aging and even extend human lifespans. It's humbling to think that a quiet little clam spent centuries resting on the ocean floor, outliving countless human generations without anyone even noticing. Bamboo can grow so fast, you can literally watch it happen. Bamboo holds the record as the fastest growing plant on Earth. Under ideal conditions, certain species can grow up to 35 inches in just one day. That's roughly 1.5 inches per hour. If you sat and watched closely for a few hours, you could actually see the bamboo growing upward, stretching toward the sky like something out of a time-lapse video happening in real time. Bamboo's growth speed comes from a unique structure. Instead of growing new cells by cell division at the tips like most plants, bamboo rapidly expands pre-existing cells by filling them with water. It's a highly efficient strategy, especially in climates with abundant rain and warmth. Bamboo is incredibly useful for humans. It's strong, flexible, and sustainable, making it perfect for building materials, textiles, furniture, and even food. Your bones are constantly being replaced. Even though your skeleton feels solid and permanent, It's actually a living, dynamic system that's constantly changing. Through a process called bone remodeling, your body is always breaking down old bone tissue and replacing it with new material. Specialized cells called osteoclasts remove old bone, while osteoblasts build new bone. On average, about 10% of your bone mass is remodeled every year. That means over a period of roughly a decade, virtually your entire skeleton will have been replaced with new bone. This continuous renewal helps repair minor damage, adapt your bones to new stresses, and maintain your body's calcium balance, critical for functions like muscle contractions and nerve signaling. Your brain generates enough electricity to power a small light bulb. The human brain, weighing just about 3 pounds, generates approximately 20 watts of power, enough electricity to illuminate a low wattage LED light bulb. This remarkable power generation happens through the electrochemical processes that enable our thoughts, emotions, movements, and every other function of our conscious and unconscious existence. The brain consists of approximately 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of other neurons, creating a vast network with over 100 trillion synaptic connections. These neurons communicate through electrical signals called action potentials. When a neuron fires, it creates a small electrical current as charged ions flow across its cell membrane. Each individual neuron generates only a tiny amount of electrical energy, about 70 millivolts when firing. This is much smaller than the 1.5 volts in a typical AA battery. However, what makes the brain's power generation impressive is the sheer number of neurons and the frequency of their firing. At any given moment, millions of neurons may be firing simultaneously, often at rates of up to 200 times per second. This electrical activity can be measured using an EEG, which detects the cumulative electrical fields produced by neurons firing in synchrony. The patterns revealed by EEGs, known as brain waves, change depending on our mental state, ranging from the high-frequency beta waves associated with active thinking to the slower delta waves predominant during deep sleep. The brain's power consumption is even more impressive than its generation. While producing about 20 watts of power, it consumes about 20% of the body's total energy while making up only about 2% of the body's weight. This high energy demand explains why the brain has such rich blood supply. It needs constant delivery of oxygen and glucose to fuel its electrical activity. Unlike a light bulb, which converts most of its energy into heat rather than light, the brain is remarkably efficient at using its energy for information processing. Computer scientists and engineers study the brain's efficiency as inspiration for developing more energy-efficient computing systems. Today's supercomputers require millions of watts to perform calculations that the human brain can accomplish with just 20 watts. The electrical nature of brain activity has led to important medical technologies beyond EEGs. Transcranial magnetic stimulation uses magnetic fields to induce electrical currents in specific brain regions, helping treat conditions like depression. Deep brain stimulation involves surgically implanted electrodes that deliver controlled electrical pulses to specific brain areas, effectively treating conditions like Parkinson's disease. Understanding the brain's electrical properties reminds us that the seemingly abstract phenomena of thoughts, perceptions, and consciousness have physical, measurable correlates in the form of electrical activity. Our subjective experiences arise from these complex patterns of electrical signals, a fascinating bridge between the physical and mental aspects of human existence. Saturn could, in theory, float. Saturn, the second largest planet in our solar system, is mostly made up of hydrogen and helium, incredibly light gases. Despite its massive size, it has a very low average density, about 0.687 grams per cubic centimeter. Water's density, by comparison, is 1 gram per cubic centimeter. Since Saturn's density is lower than water's, that means, theoretically, it could float. Of course, finding a bathtub big enough to test this idea would be a challenge beyond imagination. But in principle, if you could somehow place Saturn in a giant enough ocean, it would bob like a cosmic beach ball. There's a planet where it rains glass sideways. The exoplanet known as HD 189733b, located about 64 light-years away in the constellation Vulpecula, has some of the most extreme weather ever observed. Winds on this planet reach speeds of up to 5,400 miles per hour, 7 times the speed of sound. And instead of water, scientists believe that the atmosphere contains silicate particles, meaning that it rains molten glass. Because of the fierce winds, the glass doesn't just fall downward, it is whipped sideways at mind-boggling speeds. Imagine a storm where razor-sharp glass shards fly horizontally at thousands of miles an hour. HD 189733b is a gas giant slightly larger than Jupiter, and its intense blue color, captured by the Hubble Space Telescope, isn't due to oceans, but to the way its atmosphere scatters light. The longest hiccuping spree lasted 68 years. Charles Osborne, an American man from Iowa, holds the record for the longest continuous bout of hiccups, lasting from 1922 to 1990, an astonishing 68 years. It all began when Osborne fell while trying to weigh a hog before slaughtering it. Doctors believe that the fall damaged a small part of his brain that inhibited the hiccup reflex. At the peak of his condition, he hiccuped about 40 times per minute, though over time it gradually slowed down to about 20 times per minute. Despite his hiccups, Osborne led a relatively normal life. He married twice, had 8 children, and even managed to work for many years. Amazingly, a year before his passing, the hiccups just stopped spontaneously. His case remains one of the most extraordinary and baffling medical phenomena ever recorded. The light from the sun takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds to reach Earth. When you step outside on a sunny day, the light warming your face left the sun 8 minutes and 20 seconds earlier. This means you're not seeing the sun as it is right now, but rather as it was about 500 seconds ago. This delay occurs because light, though incredibly fast, still takes time to travel the vast distance between the sun and Earth. Light travels at approximately 299,792 kilometers per second in a vacuum, the fastest speed possible in our universe according to Einstein's theory of relativity. The average distance between Earth and the sun is about 149.6 million kilometers, a distance astronomers call an astronomical unit, or AU. Dividing this distance by the speed of light gives us the 8 minutes and 20 seconds travel time. This travel time varies slightly throughout the year because Earth's orbit is not perfectly circular but slightly elliptical. When Earth is at its closest point to the sun, in early January, sunlight takes about 8 minutes and 3 seconds to reach us. At our farthest point, in early July, the sun takes about 8 minutes and 27 seconds to reach us. This light delay has practical implications for astronomy and space exploration. When NASA engineers communicate with spacecraft, they must account for the time it takes signals to travel. For Mars missions, this communication delay ranges from 4 to 24 minutes each way, depending on the relative positions of Earth and Mars in their orbits. For more distant missions, the delay becomes even more significant. Signals to and from the Voyager probes, now in interstellar space, take over 21 hours each way. The light delay also means that if the sun were to hypothetically disappear this instant, we wouldn't know about it for 8 minutes and 20 seconds. Earth would continue orbiting the now non-existent sun during that time, as gravity also propagates at the speed of light. After that delay, Earth would suddenly fly off in a straight line, no longer bound by the sun's gravitational pull. This delay applies to all celestial objects. When we look at the nearest star system to our own, Alpha Centauri, we're seeing it as it was about 4.3 years ago. The light from the Andromeda Galaxy, our nearest major galactic neighbor, takes about 2.5 million years to reach us, meaning we see it as it was when early humans were just beginning to use stone tools. For the most distant observable galaxies, the light has been traveling for over 13 billion years. This allows astronomers to directly observe the early universe, a sort of cosmic time machine where greater distances correspond to looking further back in time. The 8-minute journey of sunlight to Earth is a fundamental constraint that shapes our perception of the universe. Your pet dog's sense of smell is up to 100,000 times better than yours. Dogs experience the world primarily through their noses, with a sense of smell that is at least 10,000 to 100,000 times more acute than that of humans. This extraordinary olfactory ability transforms how they perceive their environment, essentially giving them access to a rich, invisible landscape of scents that humans can barely detect. The biological basis for this remarkable difference starts with anatomy. A dog's nose contains up to 300 million olfactory receptors, compared to just 6 million in humans. Furthermore, the part of a dog's brain devoted to analyzing smells is proportionally about 40 times larger than the corresponding region in the human brain. Dogs also possess a second olfactory system that humans lack entirely, Jacobson's organ. Located in the bottom of their nasal passage, this specialized structure detects pheromones, chemical signals that can communicate information about reproductive status, emotional state, and identity among animals. The structure of a dog's nose enhances their smelling ability in other ways. When dogs inhale, a fold of tissue inside their nostril directs some air to flow to the olfactory region, while the rest flows to the lungs for breathing. When they exhale, air leaves through slits in the sides of their noses, creating a swirling effect that helps bring in new odors. This means dogs can maintain a continuous stream of new scents while breathing in and out. This superior sense of smell gives dogs remarkable capabilities. They can detect odors in concentrations as low as 1 part per trillion, the equivalent of detecting a single drop of liquid in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Dogs can smell cancer in human breath or urine samples with accuracy rates above 90% in some studies. They can detect blood sugar changes in diabetics, oncoming seizures in epilepsy patients, and even COVID-19 infections. A dog's sense of smell also operates across time. While humans primarily perceive the present moment through our senses, dogs can detect odors that were left hours or days earlier. They can also distinguish between incredibly similar scents. While we might smell a pot of stew, a dog smells each individual ingredient separately. In practical applications, this ability has proven invaluable. Dogs are trained to detect explosives, illicit substances, missing persons, agricultural pests, invasive species, and even historical human burial sites. Conservation dogs help researchers track endangered species through scat detection, sometimes locating animals that would be nearly impossible to find through visual searches alone. When walking your dog, what might seem like an ordinary patch of grass to you represents a complex tapestry of information to your pet, revealing which animals passed by, their gender, health status, diet, emotional state, and how long ago they were there.